this is Country Carrie, and I bottled some green beans last night, and I'm just about ready to do another batch when all of a sudden I thought, you know what? I should turn on the video camera and teach you about pressure canning. Now, pressure canning can be a scary thing because you hear people say, it can explode, and it really can. But if you're smart about it, you shouldn't have to be afraid of it. So what I do is I do my canning in the garage, and I have it clean so it's a sanitary area. But what I used to do my canning with is my Camp Chef, and they actually recommend you using a stovetop for your pressure canner because with a Camp Chef, your heat fluctuates so much. So what I do is I've chosen to use my Camp Chef, but when it's time for me to turn on the flame, I'm sitting right there and I'm paying attention to it. So one thing, heads up, if you do use your Camp Chef, I actually was trying to heat my water up too fast, and I actually burnt the bottom of my pan to where now it's a bowl, it's a cup. It heated it so fast. So now with my newer Presto pressure canner that I'm using, I'm patient and I don't try to crank up the heat because I don't want to damage my pot. This one will still work because it's formed to the Camp Chef. I cannot use this now on a regular cook stove because it doesn't sit flat. Couple things for you to know about these pressure canners. The first thing I do is I put water in it. So it recommends 2 to 3 inches. I just will take a stick or not either a stick, or I used a straw last night, or I have a table knife right here, and I can measure how much water I have. Now remember, from your 2 knuckles, that's an inch. I can estimate and say, yep, it's about 2.5 inches of water, that's enough. I recommend going closer to the 3 than the 2 because as it boils and the steam is released, it uses up some of that. What I also do to keep my jars from having that hard water deposit on it, I actually take some vinegar and pour a little vinegar inside my pots just to help that out. And it doesn't change the flavor of your food that you're putting inside of it. So because I used these last night, they have the water in it, but the water's cold. Before I put my hot jars in there, I will heat it up and make it so that it doesn't crack my jars, that cold-hot difference. When you do measure your water in your canner, make sure and do it without the little grate or measure right in the hole. So what this does is it makes it so that the jars don't sit right on top of the heat. It helps protect your jars with that little trivet. Once you get your jars ready and you put them inside your pressure canner, unlike your cold bath, it doesn't have a place per se for jars, but you just set them in there and you spread them around. And I use 7 jars, fit just well inside your canner. And then you put on your lid. And one tip about your lids is your lids have your gauges on them. It's best to get them checked yearly at your extension office to make sure that your pressure is correct. And if it's not, they will let you know how much you need to increase your pressure to make it an accurate amount for your jars. Because when you're canning them with a pressure canner, you're doing it because there's not enough acidity in the food. And this is making your foods safe to eat. And so you want to take every precaution to make your food safe. So once you put your lid on, there's actually arrow right here. So first step, you fill your water, your container with water and some vinegar. Second step, if your water is too cold, you warm it up a little bit first. Third step, you put your jars in. Fourth step, you align this, your arrow. And then fifth step is you turn your lid and lock it. Sixth step is as you're continuing to heat up your water, you're waiting for the air vent. It's right here, to vent steam. And as you vent the steam, you time it for 10 minutes. Now you don't want to vent it too long because that will take your moisture out. As your steam's coming out, some of your moisture is coming out. And so that is your sixth step, is to make sure that you vent your steam for 10 minutes. Seventh step is you put your weight on it. And they just look, they're just tiny. But what it does is it holds the pressure inside the canner. So now your gauge, once you put your cap on, your weight on, your gauge starts rising. And then as you watch your gauge to rise, you check out your poundage. Now, because of the altitude that I live in, instead of doing it at 10 pounds pressure, I need to do it at 13 pounds pressure. So my wonderful canning book, this is my favorite one, but there's many out there. Make sure you use recommended Ball Kerr type books. But it says, please add 3 pounds for pressure cooking and 10 minutes for water baths at our altitude. So you need to make sure and check your altitude. And the altitude guidelines are right inside the books, whichever book you use. It should have your altitude guidelines. So then I'm watching this gauge and I'm making sure that it is 13 pounds pressure. And I can go between 13 and 15. That's all right. But what you don't want to do is let it go below the 13. And once it hits that 13 pounds pressure, you start timing it. Now, green beans is 20 minutes, so it doesn't take too long, but you want to keep an eye on your gauge, making sure that if it's starting to get too hot, you adjust your heat. Because remember, that's the tricky part of your Camp Chef, is the heat fluctuates. So you want to keep an eye on your gauge and make sure your heat is where you need to. Sometimes you might need to turn it up a little bit. Sometimes you might need to turn it down a little bit. It's worth that to me to be able to do 2 at once and also do it in my garage. It's worth that time to sit and watch it and not have a lot of other things going on. The nice part is once that time's up, the 20-minute time is up, you can leave it. You can leave this for a little while. And what you do then is you turn off your Camp Chef. I also go and turn off my propane bottle, and you let it cool down on its own. Do not at that point take this off, because when you're messing with the poundage, either the gauge goes too far up or you're taking off the weight before it is completely out of pressure. Those are the exploding things they're talking about. So do not mess with that. But let it cool down. And once it's cool, only give it, maybe 15 minutes, go back and check it. Then you can, when the pressure's on 0, you can then open up your lid, take it off. Let your jar sit inside the container for about 10 minutes to get used to the air. especially if there's a temperature difference. And then after about 10 minutes of it being in there, you take your bottles out with your bottle lifter, and you set them on your table with that has a towel on it. And yeah, then you have wonderful food products, and you get to hear the lids pop. Music to a canner's ears is listening to the lids pop. One suggestion I want to make for you is make sure and pick up your propane tank before you start. If it's light, that means it's empty. If it's heavy, that means you have propane in it. And because you don't want to get halfway through the process and have it become empty. Anyway, so canning is not that scary. Some of the things that you can is vegetables. I love these green beans. I do mine with no salt so that they're just a little healthier. But you can do all sorts of vegetables, carrots, green beans. I've done potatoes before. They turned a little grayish. They're not as white as when you first cut them, so I wasn't as impressed. But you can do different soups, meat. Oh, meat's awesome. It looks funny on your shelf, but you can pressure can meat and keep it, especially that's great if you don't have room for it in your freezer. That's a good way to preserve it. Anyway, I hope that this helps take some of the fear out of using a pressure canner for you. I'm going to actually open up my garage door